Coming to you from the dining room table at East Barbary Lane, welcome to a special episode of Full Circle, the podcast. I am your host, Charles Tyson Jr., and today I am so thrilled to have our guest. TJ Klune is the #1 New York Times and USA Today best-selling, Lambda Literary Award-winning author of such works as The House in the Cerulean Sea, Under the Whispering Door, In the Lives of Puppets, the Green Creek series for adults, the Extraordinaries series for teens, and so many more. Today we will be discussing his newest work, The Bones Beneath My Skin. I am so thrilled to have TJ Klune at the Full Circle table. Hi TJ, how are you?
I am good, Charles. Thank you so much for having me. I truly appreciate it.
I have been looking forward to talking to you because, let me tell you, I loved the book.
That's good.
The Bones Beneath My Skin is a fabulous book. And, you know, one thing I am so grateful for, when I got the invitation to read the book, I saw queer science fiction, and I got a little nervous only because I love the genre of science fiction. But when it's a book, authors tend to do one of two things. Either they get bogged down in the science or they embrace the fiction. And when you do one and not the other, it's just not fun. But the same that cannot be said about this book. This book was so much fun. In fact, when I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about reading it. And I love when that happens. So tell me a little bit, tell me what The Bones Beneath My Skin is about.
Yeah, so this book follows the character of Nate. When the book opens, Nate is probably at the lowest a person can be. He's at the lowest of lows. His parents are dead through a horrific act of violence. His brother wants nothing to do with him. He's just been fired from his job as a journalist in Washington, D.C. for some unethical practices on his part. So we have a very flawed, broken person when the novel opens. And what he wants to do is, with nothing left, he goes to the only thing that he has left, which is a cabin in the mountains of Oregon. And he wants to go there to refresh and regroup and figure out what his next steps are. And when he gets there, he expects the cabin to be empty. It is not. Inside is a man with a gun and a little girl who calls herself Artemis Darth Vader, who is not exactly a normal child. And from there, Nate learns about them and about their past, and he has to make a decision if he wants to let himself continue to drown in his anger and his grief, or he wants to do something that could change the world. And the book follows his journey with these two other characters, Artemis and Alex. And what I love about the book, for the most part, is yes, there's the big sci-fi adventure that goes on top of it. There's a big cast of characters, but at its heart, it is about Nate and Art and Alex. They are a triangle. Without them, without any one of the three, the picture wouldn't be complete. They are pieces from a puzzle, from different puzzles, but when they go together, they still somehow fit and still form a picture. And you know, when you're writing, when you include romance in books and stuff like that, that there's a tendency to focus on just the two main characters that are as part of the romance. But with this, Art, she is 10 years old, and she is on every single page because she is just as important as Nate and Alex are. And her journey is what sends Nate off into a world where he realizes it's not what it seems. And he has to go and figure out how to do what Nate or what Alex and Art have started out to do, trying to get her home.
It was so much fun to read. And the character of Artemis is very charming. It's so charming. And I had suspected what made her special a bit beforehand, but I was almost wrong. And I love that. And it kind of gave me the dynamic between the three kind of gave me Louis Lestat and Claudia vibes, except not quite as creepy.
Right, not quite as creepy. Would not want to go to that direction, yes. And I doubt that art can be a little creepy sometimes, but she's not a child vampire queen.
Right. So what drew you to the creation of this story?
So initially, the genesis of this book goes all the way back to 2015. I wanted to do my own spin on a specific kind of story. You have to think of like Stephen King's It or E.T. or Escape from Witch Mountain, which is basically a group of kids, a group of young people have to come together to face something. I hadn't quite figured out what that something was, but I knew I wanted to go in that direction. And so the more I started thinking about it, the more I thought, okay, what if we put these young teenage boys in an adult novel and have them have to surround and protect a girl who moves to their town, who exhibits some extraordinary abilities. And I hadn't started writing anything, which is probably good because the very next year, a funny little show called Stranger Things came out and completely did everything that I was wanting to do. And that happens sometimes. My novel, Under the Whispering Door, rumination on grief and what it does to people, was initially going to be something very different. It was initially going to be, I was initially inspired by a very specific scene from Beetlejuice where Alex Baldwin and Gina Davis first die and they go to the afterlife and they sit in the bureaucratic room where everybody has to take a number and do that. And I had this idea that that's what the afterlife was and that there would be like some kind of system where it assigned morality. And then what came out after that? The Good Place. And they did the exact same thing that I did.
I hate when that happens.
It happens though, and you have to roll with the punches. So with The Bones Beneath My Skin, I set it aside for a little bit and let it cook in the back of my head. And maybe something would come of it, maybe something wouldn't. But then when I was randomly doing one of my research spirals where when I have ADHD, so that means when I find something interesting, I hyperfixate on it. And
it becomes your personality.
As much as I can. Right, exactly. Like a kid, it becomes that. And I stumbled across something that I had not heard about since I was a kid. And that was a man named Marshall Applewhite. Now, that name might not be familiar to younger people, but to people of a certain generation, say like born in the 80s and 90s like I was, you probably remember that name. Marshall Applewhite was a leader of a cult called Heaven's Gate.
Oh, right,
in
right,
the
right.
late
Yeah.
90s, this cult believed that the recently discovered comet Hale-Bopp had an alien spacecraft in the tail of the comet. And you can go online and look at all of Marshall Applewhite's videos. They're still available. He is a very striking figure. He's very tan, leathery skin. His ears stick out. He has the most inhuman eyes I have ever seen on a human being. And he talks about what the beliefs of Heaven's Gate are, what they do. And again, these videos are readily available. But what happened? They all ended up committing mass suicide. And there's some very indelible images that came out after this. For the most part, when people remember Heaven's Gate, they remember A, the comet, and B, the aftershots of what happened, which were in a bunker with bunk beds, people in their tracksuits and their white sneakers and sheets applied all over everyone. Then they were dead. And to this day, heavensgate.com still exists. You can go to the website right now and look at it. It looks exactly like it did in the 90s. And I spoke to the people who run Heaven's Gate, the website. It's not an active come join our cult kind of thing. It's more like a museum piece, an archive of what it was like at the time. And from there, I just became fascinated by the idea of cult leaders like Jim Jones and David Koresh and how one person can be so charismatic that they can insert their will upon a group of people and basically mold them into whatever they can be. It is an astonishing and terrifying thing that for some people it is so very, very easy to give up your friends, your job, your family, your money, all of that so you can follow something specifically. If you want a more recent example, think of QAnon, when that happened during the first Trump administration. That was all online, but that is, in essence, a cult. There's
I was thinking of the orange Cheeto monster. I was like, ooh, too real.
Right. There's a cult in the news right now called the Zizians, where they have murdered 6 different people over the past 8 months, and it's mostly made up of trans people in this cult who worked in the technology sector, and their beliefs are that AI is going to take over the world. So their leader, the cult leader Zizian, who was just recently arrested, believed that if they cuddled up to AI, the AI would, when it eventually took over, would allow them to live while destroying the rest of humanity. And they've killed people because of this. This happens to this day in the year 2025. There are active cults all over the world, and they fall under some of the most similar patterns, where there's one person with an idea and an entire movement in their heads, and it spreads like an infection to other people until other people come in and start doing things that they would never have done before, like taking their own life because they believe an alien spaceship is in the tail of a comet. It's fascinating because the psychology behind it is at this point really kind of unknown. Why do people follow? Why is, say, Donald Trump a cult leader in a way, shape, or form? Right. These are people who can do and say whatever they want, and people will follow them to the ends of the earth. It's fascinating. But that is what brought on the new wave for The Bones Beneath My Skin. Instead of kids surrounding, trying to fight some great evil, what if we had 2 men? And I made this almost like a sad dad kind of story,
right?
Which is, some kind of trope that happens. And I loved the dynamic that came out of this between Nate and Alex and Artemis, because not only did I get to go on an adventure with them, I got to incorporate things like cults and the psychology behind it and what that means for people who would say, I would never fall for something like that, but then they do. And they believe it. I mean, right. Why do you think people still fall for Nigerian phishing scams? Oh, I'm a Nigerian prince. Here's $2 million that I need to have saved, and you're the only person that can do it. People fall for that. Yeah, maybe a lot of them are older, but people still fall for stuff like this.
Well, I feel like a lot of times there is an element of desperation, a yearning to cling to something, whatever's missing. Or a yearning
for community, a yearning for people who think exactly like you.
Right.
Look, when I go out on tour and I talk to the audiences that I have to remind myself that in a way that's like an echo chamber. Because I'm sure there's people that I speak to who are in the audience that don't think trans people don't deserve to exist. So in a way, I am speaking to an echo chamber and getting validated by what I'm saying. And on the flip side, there are people who desperately seek that validation because they've never been listened to before.
Right.
And they want, and when someone finally listens to them, or when someone finally, acknowledges their beliefs and maybe even agrees with their beliefs, that's like this fusion that happens. Then they're all like, guess what? We should spread our ideas together. You think like I do, let's come together and talk about more people, see if we can get more people into what we're doing.
Right. And that can be a source of good, and that can be a source of great evil. Exactly. And it's fascinating how sometimes the line between the two isn't that, thick, that sometimes it's some people who are thinking they are doing great good actually cause great evil in effort to get to that good. And to me, it's the idea of moral relativism. Your actions have to be honest and good if you're trying to achieve a good result. If you step on, hurt, or kill people to get your way to a good result, is that result good? No, it's not, because you harmed so many people to get there. Right. And how often, like in the case of, this widespread furor against trans people, it's like all you need is a little bit of, well, in this case, a lot of bit of misinformation and just lies, and people will grasp onto it just because it clicks with that little thing that they think they believe in the back of their head. And it's like, oh, I'm not the only one.
The fact that this book is set in the 90s is a little bit ironic because of
I was going to ask you about that, yeah.
because of the fact that the morality panic that is going on right now about trans people is no different than the morality panic of the satanic panic of the 90s, where people were saying all these terrible things are happening with the devil and children, and nothing was actually going on.
Right.
People just chose to believe because that's what they were told. And they thought, oh, well, yeah, people would do that stuff like that. Gay people or teachers or whatever, they would believe in their pedophiles and all of this. But there was nothing to it.
Right.
Nothing happened. It was just misinformation that had been spread. Could you imagine if the internet had been as ubiquitous then as it is now, what that would have done for the morality panic? Look what it's done for the transphobia that's spreading across the North America and the UK.
Exactly.
It's because all of these people can come together and find people who think just like them and create an echo chamber,
right,
to make sure that they are listened to and that their beliefs are validated.
And that's the thing. Like, I think of yay, tangents. I think
ADHD spiral. Here we go.
Yes. I read a lot about like the KKK when I was in college, and how there were so many white supremacist groups around the country, highly concentrated in Pennsylvania, believe it or not.
And Oregon, the state where I was born and raised. It's so funny you brought this up, and I'll let you continue in a second, because the book I'm currently working on right now talks about the founding of the KKK in Oregon and what happened and everything that went that. So I am like knee deep in that history as we speak.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and also it's like one of the reasons why there are so many different factions and subgroups is because nobody can get their shit together enough to come together and organize.
But we're still seeing now. I mean, I have to be honest. I after the last election, I kind of disconnected myself from the news. It is a very privileged position to be able to take, but I knew that the news was going to be just a repeat of 2016, that every single headline was going to be Trump did this, Trump did this, Trump is this. And I remember when he was inaugurated in January, I happened to look at a news thing and it said, Trump declares the United States a country of only two genders, male and female. And I was like, this is what we're doing?
Like, that's not how that shit works though, right?
You have millions of people complaining that they can't buy eggs.
Right.
And this is what we're focused on. But then again, this is the same country where there are entire states that have enacted laws to go after one trans kid in their state who wants to play sports.
Right.
Entire states have changed laws because of one child in their
and
state.
Sometimes that one child doesn't even want to play sports. It's the fact that they might want to.
The child was merely inquiring if they wanted to play sports, and that's what we're focused on.
Or they bought a new pair of sneakers.
Right. We're not focused on inflation. We're not focused on crime. We're not focused on having necessary conversations about how to help immigration actually become something that is feasible for this country. We are not trying to help the people who are down and out. We are not trying to help poor people. We're not trying to solve houselessness or food, insecurity. We're trying to say, here's one person who isn't like most other people, so let's make sure that they know their place. You are not normal. You are abnormal. You are weird. You are strange, and we're going to make sure the laws dictate that. And that's what's happened. Look, the right to same-sex marriage in the United States is 10 years old this year.
Yep.
10 years old.
Yep.
36 states in the United States have same-sex marriage bans on the books. So if Obergefell, the right to same-sex marriage, were to fall like Roe v. Wade, there would be states where queer marriage, same-sex marriage, would be immediately invalidated.
Yep.
So imagine you've been with your partner for 40 years. You've been legally married for the last 10. But if a Supreme Court justice gets a bug up their ass like they've been hinting at they're going to do, they'll overturn the right for gay marriage and leave that to the states. And what's going to happen? Look what's happened with Roe v. Wade. There are people dying because they can't get the medical care that they need. And, bringing this back full circle on this tangent,
I see what you did there.
Trans people are have some of the highest suicide rates out of any marginalized group in the world.
Yep.
And the response is to punch down on them. That is nothing but cruelty. That
Exactly.
is absolutely nothing but cruelty. And, we've heard it many, many times over the last 8 years that cruelty is the point. But here's the thing. When your cruelty is on display like that, yes, you may be sending signals out to other people who think like you that, yeah, this is what we're doing now. But at the end of the day, history, that ever pervasive thing is going to view you like we view people like Anita Bryant now. Like we view people that all the chuds in the 50s and 60s, like we view Reagan after he let an entire generation of gay men die. The history is going to be the ultimate judge of that. And it's unfortunate that we can't say, fuck you now, get out of the office
Right.
that we voted to put you in. But I don't understand why certain people feel the need to punch down on some of the groups that they do, especially when it is never easy to be a trans person in the United States.
Right.
It's never easy. It doesn't matter if you're passing or not. It's never easy because you're always going to have somebody who hates you for who you are, simply for finding your true self and finding your identity and finding your right to live the way you want. Queer people, the best revenge we can get is to live happily and successfully. But unfortunately, there's so many people that don't want us to do that.
Exactly. And that's, getting back to the book.
Look at that. Two ADHD people, we did it.
I like to focus on, especially with the podcast now, because we're starting to burn it on the news, focusing on queer joy and queer excellence. Because, like you said, the best way to battle this is to let our light shine so bright that, it pushes them back into the shadows where they belong.
No, I wanted to burn their eyes out.
I almost said that, and then I backed up. Thank you. No, that's your job. Thank you.
The past 8 years have taught me something very, very, very important. It's when Michelle Obama in 2016 started to use the phrase, when they go low, we go high. And I understood it at the time. I understood it. Now, though, when they go low, we go lower. We drag their faces down into the mud and we step on the back of their necks. That's what we do.
You sound like my bestie. She said, when they go low, you kick them in the face. I mean, they're already down there.
Absolutely. They're already down there. Why not get down there with them? What's the worst that could happen? They're going to call you a fag. They're going to call you some horrific slur.
I have no idea what that would be like.
I have heard that from far worse people in the world. And if you want to go now, we'll go in the mud. We'll go in the mud.
And that's the interesting thing about setting the book in 1995, because I was just having this conversation last night at our local PFLAG meeting. I was saying how this is feeling like I came out in 92, 93. And this kind of feels like that, where, whereas then my mindset was, I'm here, I'm queer, and you're going to deal with me. I'm taking up space whether you like it or not. I'm taking that same energy and I'm using it to protect folks now because, I'm not scared of anyone anymore. But it's crazy. Like, I remember standing on street corners in broad daylight and having a car go by and bottles be thrown at me. You know what I'm saying? Like, that level of ignorance and hatred, it's like it's coming back and I don't like it.
Right. And so, this book, it is set in the 90s, and it is for a very specific reason. First and foremost, I posit the idea that the 90s were the biggest technological leap for humanity, because at the beginning of the decade, nobody had cell phones or internet. In the United States, at least, by the end of the decade, internet was ubiquitous and most people had cell phones. Yeah. And what did that allow you to do? Well, it allowed you to contact people from other cultures, other parts of the world that you may never have gotten to have interaction with in your entire life.
Yes.
And it could broaden your horizons. It could open up your mind. I was a white kid from rural Oregon who did not have any people of color in the tiny little town that I lived in.
You were white.
Right. We were white trash. That is that I come from that background. And so, getting the internet in 1998, I was 16 years old. Yeah, it would have been 1998 was the first time we got in. We didn't even have we had 3 channels on our television. The first time that I had anything like that was when we got internet, dial-up internet, but internet all the same.
Oh, dial-up.
And so, but at the same time, you have to remember this was the 90s, and it's weird how we were then versus where we are now. In the 90s, we were coming off the HIV and the AIDS crisis. It was still a very big thing.
Yes.
We were also entering the Clinton era, which became the era of don't ask, don't tell, which, for those who weren't alive then or don't quite remember, was basically the military's way and the United States government's way of saying, hey, gay people exist, but we don't want you to talk about it. And you can't talk about it either. So say that there was like a military
bigger closet
benefit, a military ball, a military event where people were invited. Straight people could bring their partners. Gay people, you could not. Why? Because you don't ask and you don't tell.
Right.
Basically, it's none of our business, but if you make it our business, we have to do something about it. There were people in Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military who were dishonorably discharged because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and because of their homosexuality, who in only recent years have gotten that overturned to be an honorable discharge. Because think about it. That's a shitty way of doing things in the 90s, but that's where it was in the 90s. We had gone from HIV and AIDS, a gay cancer that only affected gay people, to let's not talk about gay people. Let's not talk about them. They exist, but they're over here.
Right.
And I wanted to explore that in this book. I wanted to explore that, what it felt like to actually meet somebody who was like you, who is there. I remember the first time I met a gay person who wasn't me. And I was like, you're like me.
Right.
We're friends. I remember the first time I went to a gay bar in Tucson, Arizona at the age of 18 with my fake ID. I got to go in there, and what happened? I immediately ran into a drag queen who adopted me and took me up to where the drag queens were and told me all about drag and everything like that. These were my people. I got to be surrounded by people like me. And I think that even now in 2025, people forget how important that is for queer people. Oh, yeah. Especially queer people who live in rural areas, especially queer youth who live in rural areas, who don't get that kind of exposure unless it's on the internet.
Right.
And that's not always the safest place for young queer people to do anything like that. So I think of the 90s. I don't necessarily think of them fondly, but I do think of the 90s as a very pivotal time, not just for queer people, but for humanity as a whole. Because at the beginning of the 90s, we weren't connected. At the end, so many of us were, for better or worse.
Yeah, because like I spent the bulk of the 90s, 93 to 2000 in college. Because it took me 7 years to get my 4-year degree. And so...
If it makes you feel better, I have 1 semester of community college under my belt.
So you understand. But so I associate the 90s with that time of being a rebel, being an upstart. I was getting a dance degree, so it was like I was a creative, so everything was, challenging what's going on. So that was the perfect time. The 90s were the perfect time for all that. And the birth of the internet created so much culture, like cyberpunk, became so prevalent.
But it also allowed, gay people to talk to other gay people. I'm not talking about like hookup apps or anything like that. I'm talking about like
community at all.
Chat rooms, message boards, all of this kind of stuff where people who were once unable to talk to anybody like them were able to actually talk to other gay people, queer people, lesbians, trans people. It's for all that I hate that the internet has brought upon this world, I still have to remember that it has connected so many people who've probably felt alone and finally found somebody like them, a community.
And created, helped create conversations. Like so much of the vocabulary that is frankly being weaponized against us, the word woke comes to mind, was born on the internet. Like Tumblr, for instance. If it wasn't for Tumblr, I don't know when I would have learned the term non-binary. I don't know when
Right.
I would have had the larger conversation about the gender spectrum. You know what I mean? And that's when the internet is being used as a tool, it's a wonderful thing. But then it's like the snake eating its own tail
The
because
Ouroboros. Yeah.
of things like now Grindr, where you can order dick like pizza. You know, the community that is the gay bar and queer spaces, they're going away because, you know, the underlying reason for these places existing, you can separate out and like I said, order like pizza. So you don't need to go through the social dance of meeting other people.
And then if you haven't met the right person standing outside the bar during like the meat market hours after the bar closes and everybody's trying to find someone to hook up with so you can go home after that. Right.
You know,
that's how it is. And you know, even further beyond that, you know, gay bars are I don't think that they are as prevalent as part of our culture as they used to be. But even worse than that is lesbian bars. Those are pretty much non-existent at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, when I lived in Tucson, Arizona, there was IBT's, the gay bar, and then there was the lesbian bar in another part of town, and the lesbian bar was closed a few years after I got there.
Yeah.
The lesbian spaces for queer women, those shut down quicker than spaces for gay men ever did.
Yeah. It's so sad. And like every time I hear about someone trying to open up a lesbian centered space or woman centered space, I shout it to the mountaintops. It's like, yes, please let this succeed longer than 5 minutes.
Right. Exactly. Because, you know, when we're talking about queer women especially, we don't just necessarily mean lesbians, because these women-centered spaces were there for trans women too. They were there for all of these people who identified as a woman. And when you get rid of that, I mean, look, what is out there right now? Youth centers, which are very important, absolutely important. But your journey doesn't stop once you reach 18 or once you reach 21. And
hell, your journey doesn't start when you hit 18.
Right. And this is one of my biggest issues, is this idea of coming out being the be all and the end all of our journey. Like look, there are far greater authors than I who've written coming out stories about young people. But at the end of the day, that is not the end.
No.
Because anybody you meet for the rest of your life is someone you potentially have to come out to.
Correct.
Forever. That's always going to be something that will be part of a conversation with anybody new that you meet if they plan on sticking around in your life.
Right.
And it's the fact that, you know, we don't have spaces necessarily geared towards older queer people that aren't, you know, alcohol related in bars or hookup related and stuff like that. You know, I've seen in bigger towns, I've seen like queer book clubs or queer meeting spaces. I mean, I did a tour last year for one of my books releases, and one bookstore that I went to was a trans owned. Everybody who worked there was trans, and it was one of the most joyful experiences I've ever had, because I was surrounded by not only trans joy, but queer joy. And that's something that no matter what people try to do, they can't take that away from us, because we found each other. We found community. We found other people like us, and you can't take that away from us anymore. You cannot. You can try. You can scream and shout and say horrific things about young people who are trans and finding their truth. But at the end of the day, we still have each other, and we have always been here, and we will always be here.
And that's the thing. I was thinking about this just the other day. It's like these people, not all of them, but most of them, that are trying to take away all of our rights and trying to like legislate us out of existence. It's like they're these basically like cishet white people who've never really had to like overcome anything.
Right.
Going against us, who historically have had to overcome all of the things, and we are nothing if not resilient. We are nothing if not creative. We are nothing if not a bunch of people who make a way out of no way. So it's like, ultimately, you can't fuck with us like that.
And some of us are very vengeful. I can't, like, you know, it's funny. You're right. Our entire country is a patriarchy. It is run by old rich white men. And look, I hate that I have to say this, but frankly, sometimes I just don't give a shit. One day soon, all these old white people in power are going to die. They will. Maybe they'll be replaced by clones who are younger and just as white and just as rich. But maybe, just maybe, when all these old rich white people die.
Right.
And why haven't they yet? Honestly, if I have to see Mitch McConnell's face one more time, I swear to Christ.
What is holding him up?
I don't know. How is he functioning as a person? But regardless, change will come. It will come. It will take time, and it's going to be a lot of work. But when these old white people die, who's going to replace them? Young people.
Right.
Young people who are going to change this world to what it should have been from the beginning. Welcome to all. Welcome to everyone.
God
where
willing.
we get to exist and be who we want to be without fear of retribution from people who think that because we're different or othered, that we aren't worthy of life, existence, happiness.
Right.
If these people cared as much about anything else as they do about queer and trans people, we could probably solve world hunger. We can solve hell. If Elon Musk gave $7 billion to the United States, it would be able to solve the United States hunger and housing problems like that.
Yeah.
We could, if rich people, if Warren Buffett, Elon Musk, Donald Trump, all of them came together and said, hey, let's use our money to make the world a better place.
Right.
It could be, but it won't happen. It won't happen. We have to fight tooth and nail for everything. And you know what? When I was younger, like you, I had a chip on my shoulder when I came out. I came out in 1998, and then I graduated high school in 2000. And I was the out and proud young queer punk kid who, when we did pride parades, would be the one yelling in the faces of the evangelists standing there with the sign saying you'd all burn in hell and stuff like this. And as I got older, I started to soften a little as I was trying to find myself and trying to find who I wanted to be in the world. And I honestly expected myself to get softer as I got older. But holy fuck, dude. In 2025, I'm just now as pissed off as I was when I was 18 years old. If I see an evangelicist on the street in a queer celebration, I'm 42. I will go up and yell in their faces to ask them what the fuck they think they're doing. You know what? Mm-hmm. You have to. Sometimes, you know what? Sometimes, even though my job is words, sometimes words just don't cut it. Sometimes you have to show them that you mean business. And frankly, you know, it's like the idea of all those Nazis that we see pop up in Ohio and they're standing on bridges with their thing and they're saying, we're proud of being white. We are the white race is superior. Why don't they ever show their faces? If they're so proud of being who they are, why don't they ever show their faces? Because they know the repercussions of what happens when you're a Nazi or when you're, you know, some kind of racist, homophobe, transphobe. They know the repercussions because they know it's a shitty way to be. So they hide themselves while telling everybody else that they're better than everybody. Right. Because they're white.
White supremacists are very, very, very rarely / never any kind of superior white.
No, and because they all look the same. That's why whenever I see those news and they're like, I'm proud to be white, I'm like, but you're wearing a baklava. You're wearing something over your entire face so nobody can tell that you're white. You're wearing gloves.
And you left your mama's basement to come here.
Right, exactly. You rented a U-Haul moving truck where you all hid in the back to be driven to this area where you got out and hung up your signs. And then when confronted by other people, you're like, oh, and then they run away. That's what I love. It's so fascinating to me. People are filled with so much hate. They go online, they spout hate, they scream hate. But when they're confronted in person, they crumble. They crumble. The arguments suddenly flee out the window, and they go about, well, this is what I believe. This is what I think. Shut up. Shut up. Nobody cares about you. Nobody cares.
And part of that is, you know, there's a whole generation of people that were not raised with, like, I believe your generation, listen to me, is probably, but like, I think your generation might be the last generation that was properly socialized.
Yeah. My generation would probably be the last that was not raised by computers, TV,
Completely,
internet,
right.
and stuff like that. Right.
Right.
Because we didn't, I mean, I remember when I was 18 years old and I got my first text message. I was like, what is this?
My first
What is
text message
going
was the
on?
wrong number. And I was like,
Yeah,
what is
mine
this
was the wrong
going
number
on?
too. It was wrong. It wasn't meant for me. It was like some ad for something I don't remember. But I remember being 18 going, you can do this now?
That
With
part.
phones and stuff like that? I mean, hell, to show you how much of a Luddite I am, when smartphones first became popular in like 2011, 2012, I didn't get on that train. I was like, I don't know what that means. I had my flip phone. I was happy with it. And then in 2014, I got a smartphone for the first time. And I'll never forget going to the Verizon to get my smartphone and asking the gentleman behind the counter, what's the address for the app store? Because I thought it was a physical location you had to go to in order to get apps on your phone. So yeah, ours was probably the last generation that was not, internet was not a part of our daily lives.
Right. I remember going, have you heard about this Google? You can just ask it questions and it gives you information.
Or Jeeves. Yeah, ask Jeeves what's going on.
Asking
and he could do
Jeeves.
that too. Do you remember using AOL Instant Messenger?
Oh, God,
and
yes.
the AI called Smarter Child, where you could write, it was a friend on your friends list in Instant Messenger, and you'd write to it, and it was just like AI that they have now. It would write back to you. It wasn't very proficient. But Smarter Child was a big thing in the late 90s where you would talk to an AI on AOL Instant Messenger.
I
remember
that.
just being like fascinated by that. Like, this is the future. And now look where we are in 2025 with AI. I'm like, y'all need to do human things. That's why, look, I've said this often. I do not like people. I love humanity. Humanity gave us movies and books and music and art and dancing. People just suck.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say this like with any edge of cynicism, I try not to be a cynical person, but it's the truth. So
it's hard to, because every time you try to be like, well, maybe I should be softer towards other people because, we're all
more
together.
Understanding. You don't know what they're going through.
Right.
You don't know if they have trauma that formed their beliefs.
But before you can finish that thought, someone fucks it up.
Yeah. So, I live in a very small town in the state of Washington. I live in the mountains, in the Cascade Mountains, in a log cabin. I live up in the mountains, up on a hill. And what did I do when I first moved to my house? I put a gay pride flag outside my house. The big one with the trans and everything on it, because that's my belief. And plus, when you buy a new house, you have to make it gay. It's just what it is.
Exactly.
And what I did not know when I put that up was that my neighbor, who I had not met at that point, was a raging homophobe. And how did I find that out? Well, after I put up the flag, my handyman was leaving one day after having a meeting with me about a project that we were going to do. And my neighbor, again, who I'd never met, and my handyman had never met, stopped my handyman on his way out of driving past his house, made him roll down the window, and then asked him point blank, what's that faggot up to up there? My handyman is a straight man with children. And literally, not before he left, we were having a conversation where I told him, look, this is a pretty big project that I'm hiring you for. I trust you. We've worked together for a while, and I trust that you do what you do. But if you hire anyone that's homophobic or anybody who's even remotely smacks of that, I will fire all of your asses without a second thought.
Yep.
And so when that happened right after he left, he called me. He goes, I just want to let you know that I took what you said seriously, and your neighbor called you some really horrific things. And I said, all right, straight ally, you got it. Let's do it. Right. And so what did I do? As a queer person, I thought, what should I do in a situation like that? This is the house I want to live in for the rest of my life. I love it here. And what can I do knowing that my neighbor is a homophobe? For all I know, maybe he's the type of person that'll escalate. Maybe he'll get angry at me. Maybe he'll come up. Maybe he'll talk to someone who hates gay people more than he does. Maybe they'll do something. Maybe somebody could hurt me, come after me. So I got revenge. And the way I got revenge was I found out that he does not own the house. He rents it. And I found out that his realtor was his landlord was a big realtor in the state of California who worked for a very big realty company. So I tagged the realtor, his realty company, on Instagram, and I asked, why do you rent to a homophobic tenant? Why do you rent to this person who is very vitriolic in what he says? I have never gotten a call from a realty agent that fast in my entire life. They called me, and of course they said things like, I'm so sorry that I did not know he was like that. I would never do this. And I told them flat out, here's what I want. I want you, when you get back into town, to bring your tenant up, march up your way up to my house, knock on my door, and when I answer the door, your tenant will apologize. The reason I want this is not to rub it in his face, not to make him feel lesser. The reason I want this is that my books are taught in middle schools, high schools, and colleges all over the world. He has children. What happens if one of my books is taught in their schools, and what happens if one of their kids picks up the book and says, Daddy, I really love this book. I heard this author lives here. Can we go meet him? And this daddy has to say, sorry, honey, I called him a faggot. We can't. We can't go see him. That's what I wanted. I wanted him to know that actions have consequences. Not just because I was upset, but because what happens if your kid turns out to be queer? And if you think that this gentleman who stopped someone he never met and used that kind of word, do you think he's never said that in front of his kids before? Come on.
Right.
Come on. So the landlord says, I'll do what I can. Never happened. Never happened. But what does happen is two different things. First and foremost, whenever these people see me, they run inside their house. Second, the landlord reached out to me late last year and said, hey, their lease is up in April. Either they'll move or do you want to buy the house? Do you want to become their landlord? I had to weigh that for a moment because A, gross. I don't want to be a landlord, even if it means having these people. So what am I going to do? I'm buying all the land around the house.
Work.
Yeah, I'm not buying that house. So even if they choose to renew the lease, I will still own all the land around their house. So now when they try to go outside and try to go onto my property, I will tell them, you cannot be on my property. I'm sorry.
Work.
Revenge. So I don't have to be a landlord, but I still get to be a dick.
And see, those are my three favorite qualities when it comes to queerness.
Yeah.
Our resilience, our creativity, and our pettiness. I love that about us.
I don't take, when I was a kid, I took a lot of shit. I'm in my 40s now. I don't take shit from anyone. Anyone. At all. If you want to try to walk all over me, that's fine. You can try, but you should not be surprised when this faggot fights back, because I won't let people win like that. I won't. I refuse. I refuse, because for all I know, maybe, just maybe, this will be the one thing that this dude needs to be like, holy shit, I'm a fucking asshole. Maybe that's what'll happen. I doubt it.
Right.
I rarely find that homophobes are introspective in any way, shape, or form, but maybe it could happen. Maybe he'll stop and think, holy crap, I did this. That chances of that got thrown out the window a couple of weeks ago because now they have a big Trump flag sitting on front of their house. So I keep waiting for him to be like, hey, what do you think about my flag? And I want to say, I don't care about that kind of stuff like you do.
Right.
Sorry.
Exactly. It's like,
just remember, revenge. Revenge. Living happily, living successfully, being your own person, making space for yourself, and never letting anyone take that away from you. Ever.
Exactly. Well, like in our immediate area, like I love where we live. I was a city boy for 42 years. I lived in Philadelphia, and now we live in Jersey in the suburbs. And I love where we live. We've got, a few Trump flags around us. We noticed that they would have their flagpoles and they would have their American flag flying. And then underneath that, they would either have a Trump flag or a Blue Lives Matter flag or something like that. So
or
it's like,
the Virginia flag that says, don't tread on me, with a snake that comes
exactly.
around. Yeah.
So we're like, okay, well, on our flagpole, we're going to have our American flag and our Progress Pride flag because, we're following the rules and we dare you to say something. And we have 4 corners to this property, so we're going to have 4 pride flags, one on each. You see us coming. So, that plus, Martha and I, we're getting ready to start our 4th season of this podcast. And we've noticed that the listenership in our immediate area and the surrounding areas has gone up a lot. So folks know who we are, and I think that's helped create our bubble, because it's like they've heard the things we'll say and have no problem saying it.
But the biggest thing that I think is, and should be the focus now, especially going forward, is how we can protect young queer people. We can. You remember a few years ago? Oh, it's probably even longer now. When that movement came out, the It Gets Better movement.
Yes.
I hated that with a fiery passion, because you were telling young people, it gets better. Not now. It's not going to get better now. It'll get better at some point in the nebulous future. It gets better. Not today, probably not tomorrow, but when you get older and you don't have to live under your parents' thumb or live under this kind of homophobia. It was never actionable. It was more like, here, let's put things off for a little bit. My big thing is that we have to remember that there are queer trans youth that are getting picked on, not just by their classmates or their teachers, but by politicians.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I've spent the last few years talking to young people all over the world. They are smarter, savvier, more empathetic than we ever were.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Because they have the phone. They literally have a little magic box that can connect them with any piece of information known to humanity. That's what they can do. And they know that their LGBTQIA trans classmates are being targeted. They know books are being removed from their schools. They know laws are being enacted to target one person, and they're pissed off about it.
Right.
They are angry. They are upset because they see how older generations are built on the backs of marginalized communities without giving them their due, without giving them their respect, without giving them the hope and joy that all other white people get to have. So why not let other people have that? Young people, I know it's going to be a difficult fight, but they are going to change the world. They absolutely will, because they are better than we ever were. Ever.
Oh, I love, like, every time I read about students having a walkout.
Yeah. Over their queer classmates, or over a jurisdictional thing or everything. They walk out because they know. Are some of them walking out so they don't have to go to school? Yeah, probably. But you know what a lot of them are doing? Standing up for what's right.
Right.
Fighting for what's right. We've seen young people do this for generations. Yep. We saw the queer riots in the Black Cat in Silver Lake and Stonewall in New York. We saw the young queer, young trans people, young people of color coming together to fight for the rights of us, the rights that we now take for granted sometimes.
Right.
Not only do I wish for the safety and protection of young people, but I wish that more people remembered their history, especially queer people, knowing where we came from, knowing who fought for your rights, that it was trans and women of color who really were the ones fighting for our rights, that the reason it's called LGBTQ, the reason why lesbians are first when it used to be GLBT, is because lesbians were some of the only people who came into the hospital rooms of dying HIV and AIDS men. They put us first, so gay men put them first. This is why it's LGBTQ. Yep. We need to know, a lot of people know about Marsha P. Johnson and Stonewall and everything that happened there. But the police raids actually started in Silver Lake, California, where there was an entire row of gay and lesbian bars until one night in the 70s, the Black Cat was raided. All of those bars were raided. The Black Cat still exists. It's still there. It's a historical monument now with a restaurant inside and whatnot. But you have to know your history. For Tucson, Arizona, the reason Pride started in Tucson, Arizona was because in the 1970s, a gay man came to Tucson from another state to visit friends. They went to a gay bar. The man left after the bar closed, where he was attacked and murdered by 4 teenage boys. Guess what happened to those teenage boys? They got parole for what they did. And that's why Pride started. So many of the things that we do started because of tragedy, because of death, because of pain. And we wanted to make it into something beautiful. It's still a work in progress, but we are doing the best we possibly can. And last thing I want to say on this tangent, please as we're getting closer to spring, that means we're getting closer to summer, which means we're getting closer to Pride Month. Please boycott corporate pride bullshit. The ones that change their company logo in
Right.
June and be like, we like gay people now. Here,
Right.
look, buy gay stuff. And then the next month they're like, we're giving money to Republicans
Right.
because we want to further their agenda.
Yeah.
Don't fall for that. Don't fall for that BS. Be queer, be proud, but do it on your own terms.
Right. Yeah. It's so crazy. We spent so much time battling the man in the establishment only to want to be part of it.
Yeah, it is. It is true. We have some great people in the world, great authors, artists, queer that are doing transformational things. We just have to ensure that those people are protected. Look, again, I'm speaking from a place of privilege. I am very successful, but I'm also a cis white gay. I am considered a safe gay.
Right.
I'm not a trans person. I'm not, a person of color. My books do not get banned at the level that trans authors get their, or queer black authors get their books banned. If you
Right.
look at the American Library Association's top 10 banned and challenged books in the United States, every single one of them is queer.
Uh-huh.
Some of them are by black authors about the black queer experience.
Mm-hmm.
I am in a very safe position, but what's going to happen? Do we think they're going to stop coming after they come for trans people?
Nope.
Of course not. Because once they get done with trans people, they're going to be like, okay, what about non-binary people? What about gender non-conforming if that's not included in the trans umbrella? What about bisexual people?
Right. I
What
mean,
about lesbians?
we already
What about
don't
gay
exist. So
Right. So either this is going to we're going to go back into the closet under Don't Ask, Don't Tell, something like that again, which I'm a loud motherfucker, man. That will never happen for somebody like me. Or they're going to try to eradicate the rights and of an entire community. And don't think that they won't. Because if you give them an inch, they will take a mile. They always do.
Yep. That's why Martha always says, I'm going to be as loud and open my mouth as much as possible, because if one day I disappear, I will be missed.
Yeah. And you will. And that's for me too. For every death threat that I get, for every person who hates me because I do what I do, I think about the thousands upon thousands of people I've met, or the thousands upon thousands of messages I've got from queer people, from straight people from all walks of life, from elderly people, elderly men, especially the generation above mine who was decimated by HIV and AIDS, not knowing that this kind of literature existed. They did not know that gay people could be in books and do what gay people are doing in fiction and stuff like that now. To be able to have that place, especially for older queer people who saw friends and families and lifestyles devastated, that they get to find some kind of happiness and peace and joy after going through that, is one of the most remarkable experiences that I've ever had.
And that reminds me, getting back to the book, you mentioned, that you got pushback with this book, The Bones Beneath My Skin, because you classified it as not just science fiction, but also romance, even though there's only one quote unquote sex scene.
Oh God, that pissed me off like you would
Yeah,
not believe.
talk about that a little bit, because that struck me.
So I was with a former publisher, an indie publisher. I had been with them since the beginning, and I sent in this book, and I saw a couple of messages that were not meant for me to see. First and foremost was a message to my editor about this book saying, here's the new TJ Klune. This one is weird even for him. And then second of all, them wanting to say, hey, we don't know that this can be considered a romance because this book only has one sex scene. And I was livid. Because I'd heard that word weird used to describe me as a pejorative my entire life. When I was a kid, my parents would call me weird. They'd make fun of me for my love of reading and writing. I heard that from teachers. I heard that from classmates. I love my weirdness now, but when I was a kid, that was the thing that set me apart. And I had an almost PTSD like flashback of, oh, weird. That's where we're going with this. That's what you think. That's the word you don't mean the word weird like when I mean it.
Right.
Like it's a good thing. You meant it as in like, this is weird. And second of all, they started asking me to put in more sex in the book. And I said, no, I don't even like writing sex scenes as it is. But what does that mean for asexual people? I'm asexual. Do you think that I am incapable of having romance because I don't like sex that much? I have never. The turnaround that they attempted to do to save face. Oh, that's not what we meant. That's not what we meant. We just know that there's certain expectations that I said, I don't give a fuck about expectations.
Right. That's not your fault.
If you don't think this is a romance because these people bone once on page, that's a you problem, not a me problem. So I pulled the book. I pulled it from this publisher. And I had this grand idea of self-publishing it on my own. What I did not know was that this set off a thing that still goes on to this day, because what we learned after I pulled that book was that this publisher had been embezzling money from not just me, but from other authors, from other creatives that they worked with. To this day, this publisher owes me north of $50,000 in back paid royalties and stuff like that. So I had to pull every book I had published with them, 20 plus books, and The Bones Beneath My Skin, and self-publish all of them at the same time. So The Bones Beneath My Skin, to me, got lost in the shuffle with all that. And then a few years later, Tor came knocking and said, hey, thank you for being successful with The House in the Cerulean Sea. We would like to publish some of your other back catalog. And I thought, Bones Beneath My Skin. I love this book, 2 pieces. I love the message. I love Artemis Darth Vader more than almost any other character I've written. Please give this book a chance. And they said, fuck yeah, we'll do that. And then they publish it. No issues. No, this book is weird. No, this book needs more sex. Nothing. They said they were happy to do it. And guess what? It debuted at number 6 on the New York Times bestseller list. Bam. Fuck yeah. Yeah. That's what you do. Remember what I said? Revenge. Happily, successfully get revenge where you can. And that's what I did.
I love it. And I also love, like, the one sex scene that there is, I feel like if it were more gratuitous than it was, it would not be as hot as it was.
If I put sex in a book, it is there for a reason. I'm not writing necessarily to titillate. I'm not there writing, for somebody's masturbatory fantasies, whatever.
Right.
I'm by that point in the book, if you can't feel that connection and you need sex to justify that, then I've failed to do my job.
Right.
The organic relationship that blossoms between Nate and Alex was something that I took great care in, because I was very concerned about the idea of trauma bonding, which is what you think of when you see a big action movie where there's terrorists and explosions and the guy gets the girl. Do you really think they're going to stay together? They just went through something horrific and profound. That's what brought them together. Is that a relationship built to last? And so with this book, I wanted to take great care to avoid it reading like trauma bonding, to actually make it a real viable relationship. And when you get to the single sex scene in this book, you believe that there's already something between them, that they don't need sex to add it on. Sex isn't necessary, but it is an additive that helps to cement their connection. And I love that it wasn't full on penetrative sex. It was not, let's do this. It's not Brokeback Mountain. Let's spit on it and let's go in. It was a time and place kind of thing, what they could actually do with where they were, and that it felt right for that moment to actually happen when it did.
It felt so real. And the tension that you created between the two characters was like way better than the actual sex scene. And the fact that what happened was like you said, it's what they could do in the constraints of where they were. Yeah. So it's like,
and it only went on for a couple of pages. That was it.
Right.
That was all it was. It was not, there wasn't sex every single chapter. This wasn't a 10,000 word sex scene with penetrative sex and all this other stuff that goes along with it that would not have made sense for this.
And it's hard to write that and have it be good.
It can be, yeah. And I've written some that are not very good. And it's just the idea that the more you write, the better you'll become, or at least that's what I hope.
Right.
So, but yeah, that sex scene, I'm really proud as an asexual person, sex is for me, whatever. But I'm very proud of that scene in the book because A, I feel it's earned. And B, it feels like, yeah, that's a next logical step for these two people.
Right. And having that detail about you makes it even better because it's like, wow, it was very organic. That relationship was so wonderful. And it grew from like real animosity to like, oh, okay, you're that little kid punching the other little kid because you like them, not because you don't like
right,
them.
exactly. They were pulling each other's pigtails. Exactly what it is. Yeah.
And then it became that whole, will they or won't they? Will they? Oh, come on. Just one time. Come on.
Right, exactly. And I love that interplay. I love that. That's why most of the books that I write, if they have some kind of romantic angle to them, I'm going to make you wait. I'm going to make you work. I'm not going to write a book where two characters meet and then all of a sudden they have sex on the first, page or whatever. That's not how I do. Maybe that's more real life than not. But I love it when you as the reader feel the pull, and by the time that does happen, you're like, come on, let's fucking kiss already. You're like a little kid with your GI Joes and your Barbies and you're knocking them together.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that at one point I wasn't sitting in front of the book going, kiss him, him, just kiss him.
Yeah, I always want to make people reach that line and then maybe cross it just a little bit more before I give you what you want.
I love it. I love it so much. Here's a question for that ass. Who would you say were your biggest literary influences?
Like many people of my generation, I grew up reading Stephen King at far too young an age.
Same.
I read my first Stephen King book when I was 11, and that was The Stand, which is probably not the best book for an 11-year-old to read.
Ambitious.
I did not understand most of it, but I remember being enthralled in ways that I hadn't been before. I did not know words could do that, can make you feel that way. And the fact that King is in his late 70s and still putting out 2 books a year?
Right.
Jesus. Yeah. I mean, he just announced a new novel or a new picture book that's in collaboration with Maurice Sendak, who was passed away many, many years ago.
Wow.
But Maurice Sendak did a bunch of drawings for this opera, this mystical, terrifying opera that never got done. So Stephen King was approached by this publisher with the artwork and said, do you want to write a story based on Maurice Sendak's art? And he said, fuck yeah. And so he did. That's cool, man. Maurice Sendak, to me, is one of the greatest authors that has ever existed. If you don't know why, and you haven't read it since you were a kid, read Where the Wild Things Are. Do it.
Yeah.
It is remarkable fiction. It is remarkable fiction. Growing up, I read a lot of horror, as I said, but I also, one of the first experiences I had with gay people in books was a book called The Front Runner. Do you know that book?
I do not.
Okay. So in the 70s, it was considered the first critically commercial and successful in terms of sales gay novel. It was written by a straight white woman named Patricia Nell Warren. And this book was about a collegiate coach named Harlan who is training one of his runners, Billy, for the Olympics. And this book was given to me by my librarian after I came out to her at 16 years old. She was the first person I came out to. And so she was like, here's a gay book with gay people in it. You can read this. And I said, hooray. And so I started reading the book and I was transported. I was enchanted. I was moved in ways that I didn't know that gay people could be like this in books. This is pre-HIV AIDS. Right. This was set, it was very New York City bathhouse era kind of a story. But it was a love story between Billy and Harlan. And sorry, I'm about to spoil a 50-year-old book that was once optioned by Paul Newman to be made into a film. But the book ends with Billy running in the Olympics, getting shot in the head by an assassin from the stands, and that's the end.
Oh, shit.
The end of the book. So imagine you're first reading gay people in a book your first time, and they get murdered. Right. They get killed.
Fuck.
I told myself I never wanted to write a book like that. That if I was going to write a book with gay people in it, they were going to not get murdered. They were not going to get hurt. They were not going to get killed.
I appreciate
at the end
that.
of their story.
Because that was a trope for so long.
Yeah, fridging lesbians, burying your gays. It's still prevalent to this day. I mean, you can still see certain TV shows that have that problem. But in 2011, when my first book came out, I got an instant message one day on Facebook from Patricia Nell Warren.
Work.
She had read my first novel and enjoyed it and wanted to reach out to me. What did I do? I fangirled. This is Patricia Nell Warren. She was an institution. She has since passed away. But I remember telling her the first quote unquote gay novel that I read was The Frontrunner. And I'll never forget her response. She wrote back, "I am so sorry."
Okay, she knew. Okay.
She knew. She had heard from she was a very fierce LGBTQ advocate, ally through and through. And she heard from so many gay men that the book hurt them. So what did she do? She went and wrote 2 sequels to that book that showed the aftermath and showed this found family picking themselves up, putting themselves back together, dealing with trauma and grief. One of my most prized possessions is a first edition signed copy of The Frontrunner that I have sitting on my shelf because the story impacted me so much that I never wanted to write a book like it.
I love that.
I do too. I love Miss Nell Warren. I miss her terribly. She was a wonderful person. I got to have many conversations with her before she passed. She was a delightful human being and did more for the LGBTQ community than most street people ever have.
And that's a conversation that I'm always having with straight people. You don't get to call yourself an ally.
No.
You have to be told that you are an ally.
Right.
Like I say, it's the
Absolutely.
same as the word diva. It doesn't count when you call yourself. That must be given to you.
Typically, it should come from a drag queen, too.
It don't hurt.
As a matter of fact, it might help quite a bit, yeah.
Is there, do you listen to music when you write? What is the soundtrack for your writing?
Well, it depends on the book I'm writing. And
Okay.
for The Bones Beneath My Skin, I made soundtracks that were all 90s focused. It was REM. It was Savage Garden. It was Britney Spears. It was all these Michael Jackson. All of these people that I grew up listening to, I included in the soundtrack that I made for the book. But my favorite artist in the world, someone that I have gone and seen live multiple times, will always be Florence and the Machine. Good Christ, does she sometimes make me question my sexuality because she is a handsome woman. And I adore, I've seen her live 3-4 times, and it's the most amazing. I love that music so much. But I also am very, very into hip hop and rap music because especially music like by Missy Elliott or Busta Rhymes or Kendrick Lamar, who are such extraordinary wordsmiths. They can do things with words and rhythm that I will never be able to do, especially Missy Elliott and Busta Rhymes. The fact that they are so fast and can enunciate so clearly that you never miss what they're saying, and they do this wordplay that is so extraordinary. I love all kinds of music. I try to listen to everything, but man, rap music when it's a good lyricist, when it's a good writer, is extraordinary to listen to because it can do things with words that you didn't think were possible. It's so cool how people can do things with words, put them in certain order to make them feel a certain way. I love it.
And I love it when it's clever. Like,
yes.
Kendrick Lamar, I'm sorry, You Want to Strike a Chord is probably A minor, is one of the most disrespectful and clever.
I heard when that song first came out last year, and I listened to it and I heard that line, I was like,
yeah.
And then the smile he did at the Super Bowl, the smile, I was like, God, I would not want to be the person that's directed towards.
It is not a good time to be Drake.
No, it is not a good time. And then Serena Williams was up there doing the clip walk. I was like,
so beautiful. That whole thing was so perfect. Yeah. Now, you know who is, this may or may not be surprising to you. You know who is a rapper who is a clever lyricist?
Who?
Bob the Drag Queen.
What? Really? They have music? putting out music on their... I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. Oh. Bob the Drag Queen is my favorite line. It's in a song they put out called Gay Bars.
Okay.
Already clever. And the line is, I don't speak Spanish, but I will tapatio. See? Clever.
I love... There's have you heard of Todrick Hall?
Yes.
And his song Fag, the rap song Fag? You should listen to that. It is remarkable.
Okay.
It is, his lyricism in it is hysterical. I absolutely love it. It's basically, you used to call me fag and now you want up on my nuts. And it is the funniest thing in the world. I love it. I love that song.
I have conflicting feelings about Todrick Hall, but I will say when you want some
I know.
Yeah.
That,
but when you want some top tier faggoty shit, Todrick is the one to go to.
That's what he does.
Yeah. Like, period.
Right. But see, then I think about, like how rap music was in the early 2000s, and sometimes can still be today, where you think of like Eminem, who was, notoriously homophobic lyrics and stuff that. But then he grew. Then he came out and did all these things with Elton John, did all this music, did a lot of talking, a lot of listening and learning. And yeah, now he's in his 50s. Okay, right. I get that. But he's not the asshole that he used to be. He learned, he listened, he talked, and he grew. And he's still one of the greatest rappers ever. Yeah. But he doesn't have to do this where he makes fun of marginalized groups to do it.
Right.
You don't have to do that. You can, unless you're queer yourself, you can make fun of whoever you want. That's fine.
And that's the thing with hip hop. It's like, you have to be really good for me to follow you after a certain point, because sometimes I know what I'm in for when I hit play. Like Busta Rhymes, for instance. Mm-hmm. Top tier lyricist, one of the best. I know I'm going to hear some homophobic shit when I hit play. I know I am. Mm-hmm. But, it's like, it's the price of admission sometimes. It is. And you know what? A younger me would have bristled probably. Like the 18-year-old me with a chip on his shoulder who came out and stuff like that might have bristled at something. I don't want to think I've softened in my old age, but I also kind of realized that was kind of the thing to do. Right. Yeah.
Time. That's how it was. And maybe it's gotten a little bit better than that, but at the time that's what everybody did. Right.
My dog is going crazy because we just got a delivery. He's this big, but he has to guard the entire neighborhood. This has been an amazing conversation.
Thank you. It has been a delightful
and
conversation.
Some of it was even about the book.
I know. We did talk about the book, for The Bones Beneath My Skin.
Yes.
Out now wherever books are sold. And if you can, you may be able to find a pretty cool version with painted edges and everything like that. So get it now before they're all gone. It's a really damn good book.
It really, really is. I highly recommend it. I actually did have one more question about the book.
Yeah.
So the book has been described as an action movie in book form, which, I agree with that. If you were going to cast it, who would play who?
So I want to avoid I want to try to make it as queer as possible. So Alex could be played by Lee Pace, who is a tall drink of homosexual water. He's been in Pushing Up Daisies. He's been in Lord of the Rings, all of that. He is he's like 6'5" and just like gorgeous. And,
oh my.
Hello, I'd like to be his friend. And then why don't we get somebody for Nate, why don't we get somebody, obviously he'd have to be in his youngers, he'd have to be in his 20s. Get one of the popular boys who hasn't done a Jake Gyllenhaal, Heath Ledger, I'm going to be gay for a little bit kind of thing.
Right.
Let them get like, what's his name? What's the guy? Tim Chiru? Tim Chalamet. Timothy Chalamet.
Oh, really?
I don't know. I don't know young people that well in terms of acting that well. I could have said Tom Holland, but I just don't want to do
I
that.
actually thought Tom Holland, but no, Chalamet, no. I'll take it.
No, or you know what? Or you know what? I just changed my mind. I'm going to change out white people for Lee Pace. What's that guy who's in the Top Gun movies that's everywhere now? And what's his name? He was in Twisters. Glenn Powell, that dude, white guy
okay.
who looks like every other handsome white guy you've ever seen.
Right.
You could do it. You could do it.
Okay. All right.
You could do it.
What about Artemis?
Oh, I have no idea. It's probably a good thing I don't know children actors' names, so I have no idea.
Right. I mean,
get somebody unknown, somebody who's never been in film or television before.
Did you see The Eternals?
Oh yeah.
The actor that played the eternally little kid.
Oh right, yeah. Okay, that could work. Absolutely.
Yeah. That's who I pictured actually.
Yeah, there would have to be a kind of gravitas there because you're playing a kid, but are you?
Right.
Are you really?
Right. Wow. Okay, now I want to see the movie, so you have to make that happen.
Oh,
so
I do too.
Get on that.
Yeah, I'll get right on that. Yeah, absolutely. As if Hollywood isn't broken beyond repair when it comes to adaptations for books. And here's my thing that I'll take away from it. Even if my books never get adapted into anything, which, who knows what could happen at this point, has there ever really, really been a book that's better than, or a movie that's better than the book? Really? Can you list like 5 different things where you could say, yeah, this was better? I've never seen a movie where I thought, oh, you know what? I will take that back. There are, I just lied. There are 4. The Lord of the Rings trilogy is better than the book. And also, coming full circle, Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are. Spike Jonze adapted that with James Gandolfini doing the voice of one of the main monsters. One of the best book-to-film adaptations I've ever seen.
Okay. There are, and I can't think of any now because my brain doesn't want to brain.
Yeah.
But it does happen, but when it does happen, it's very rare.
It is. And book to film adaptations are already rare to begin with, especially when it comes to fantasy, which needs bigger budget, especially when you add LGBTQIA on top of that. You would think Hollywood is like liberal leaning. No, they are very conservative. We had multiple studios turn down the House in the Cerulean Sea because they said, we don't know how to position the Antichrist. I'm like, he's a 6-year-old kid.
Right.
That's what he's just a kid. But they didn't want to position it. Sometimes I do wonder, though, is it because of the gay?
Right.
I had one producer who told me he wanted to tone down the gay stuff. And I said, well, you'll never be making anything of mine ever. Right.
And it's like, what does being a kid have to do with anything? The Omen series exists.
Right. Or that Neil Gaiman show on Amazon with David Tennant and what's his name?
Good Omens.
The other guy. Yeah, Good Omens. That dealt with an Antichrist kind of a character who was a kid. It's not that hard. It is not that hard to make. But I'm just happy that I get to write books. At the end of the day, that's all I want to do.
There you go. And I want you to do it because you've made a fan out of me.
Thank you.
TJ Klune, thank you so much for joining us and going on tangent after tangent with me because it was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me. This was a delightful conversation. I appreciate it.
I have a feeling this will not be the last time we sit.
No, it better not be. I've told my publicity team that look, this is a safe space. I've told my publicity team that I'm reading Really Sick and Tired of Talking to Straight People.
That's a whole word. I hear you. I'm
because there's certain questions that queer interviewers don't even need to ask. You don't even need to do it. But straight people are like, so why include gays in it?
Because fuck you, that's why.
Right? Because I never got to see myself, so...
Exactly. The representation is important, damn it.
Yeah, and look, I love all of the people I've gotten to speak to over the past, couple of months for the release of The Bones Beneath My Skin. But at the same time, there's just something talking to other queer people that can understand. That
shorthand.
And that can speak on things that others cannot and should not speak on.
Exactly, because, that's how we get Brendan Fraser winning an Oscar for playing a gay role and then trying to say it's a universal story.
Or when Eddie Redmayne played that trans woman in the movie.
And then became a J.K. Rowling apologist.
Yes! Oh, you know how we can end this interview? fuck J.K. Rowling and everything she stands for. If we lived in a just society, she would be shunned from any kind of contact with the human race.
Period. Bam. Thank you, TJ Klune, for that word.
Thank you. Thank you.
You have a wonderful day, sir, and I can't wait to talk to you again.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye. Full Circle is a Never Scared Productions podcast, hosted by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal, produced and edited by Never Scared, executive produced by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal. Our theme and music is by the Jingleberries. All names, pictures, music, audio, and video clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.